It's wonderful to be back. I love this wonderful gathering, and you must be wondering, what on earth? Have they put up the wrong slide? No, no. Look at this magnificent beast and ask the question, who designed it? This is TED, this is Technology Entertainment Design, and there's a dairy cow. It's a quite wonderfully designed animal. And I was thinking, how do I introduce this? And I thought, well, maybe that old doggerel by Joyce Kilmer, you know, poems are made by fools like me, but only God can make a tree. And you might say, well, God designed the cow. But of course, God got a lot of help. This is the ancestor of cattle. This is the oryx. And it was designed by natural selection, the process of natural selection over many millions of years. And then it became domesticated thousands of years ago. And human beings became its stewards. And without even knowing what they were doing, they gradually redesigned it and redesigned it and redesigned it. And then more recently, they really began to do sort of reverse engineering on this beast and figure out just what the parts were, how they worked, and how they might be optimized, how they might be made better. Now, why am I talking about cows? Because I want to say that much the same thing is true of religions. Religions are natural phenomena. They're just as natural as cows. They have evolved over millennia. They have a biological base, just like the oryx. They have become domesticated, and human beings have been redesigning their religions for thousands of years. This is TED, and I want to talk about design. Because what I've been doing for the last 4 years, really since the first time you saw me, some of you saw me at TED when I was talking about religion, and in the last 4 years I've been working just about nonstop on this topic. And you might say it's about the reverse engineering of religions. Now, that very idea, I think, strikes terror in many people, or anger, or anxiety of one sort or another. And that is the spell that I want to break. I want to say, no, religions are an important natural phenomenon. We should study them with the same intensity that we study all the other important natural phenomena, like global warming, as we heard so eloquently last night from Al Gore. Today's religions are brilliantly designed, brilliantly designed. They are immensely powerful social institutions, and many of their features can be traced back to earlier features that we can really make sense of by reverse engineering. And as with the cow, there's a mixture of evolutionary design, designed by natural selection itself, and intelligent design, more or less intelligent design, and redesigned by human beings who are trying to redesign their religions. So this is, you don't do book talks at TED, but I'm going to have just one slide about my book, because there's one message in it which I think this group really needs to hear, and I would be very interested to get your responses to this. It's the one policy proposal that I make in the book at this time, when I claim not to know enough about religion to know what other policy proposals to make, and it's one that echoes remarks that you've heard already today. Here's my proposal. I'm going to just take you a couple of minutes to explain it. That education in world religions, on world religions, for all of our children, in primary school, in high school, in public schools, in private schools, and in homeschooling. So what I'm proposing is, just as we require reading, writing, arithmetic, American history, so we should have a curriculum on facts about all the religions of the world, about their history, about their creeds, about their texts, their music, their symbolisms, their prohibitions, their requirements. And that this should be presented factually, straightforwardly, with no particular spin, to all of the children in the country. And As long as you teach them that, you can teach them anything else you like. That, I think, is maximal tolerance for religious freedom. As long as you inform your children about other religions, then you may, and as early as you like, and whatever you like, teach them whatever creed you want them to learn, but also let them know about other religions. Now, why do I say that? Because democracy depends on an informed citizenship. Informed consent is the very bedrock of our understanding of democracy. Misinformed consent is not worth it. It's like a coin flip. It's just not, it doesn't count, really. Democracy depends on informed consent. This is the way we treat people as responsible adults. Now, children below the age of consent are a special case. Parents, I'm going to use a word that Pastor Rick just used. Parents are stewards of their children. They don't own them. You can't own your children. You have a responsibility to the world, to the state, to them, to take care of them right. You may teach them whatever creed you think is most important, but I say you have a responsibility to let them be informed about all the other creeds in the world too. Now, the reason I've taken this time is I've been fascinated to hear some of the reactions to this. One reviewer for a Roman Catholic newspaper called it totalitarian. It strikes me as practically libertarian. Is it totalitarian to require reading, writing, and arithmetic? I don't think so. All I'm saying is, and facts, facts only, no values, just facts about all the world's religions. Another reviewer called it hilarious. Well, I'm really bothered by the fact that anybody would think that was hilarious. It seems to me to be such a plausible, natural extension of the democratic principles we already have that I'm shocked to think anybody would find that just ridiculous. I know many religions are so anxious about preserving the purity of their faith among their children that they are intent on keeping their children ignorant of other faiths. I don't think that's defensible. But I'd really be pleased to get your answers on that. Any reactions to that later. But now I'm going to move on. Back to the cow. This picture, which I pulled off the web, the fellow on the left is really an important part of this picture. That's the steward. Cows couldn't live without human stewards. They're domesticated. They're a sort of ectosymbiont. They depend on us for their survival. And Pastor Rick was just talking about sheep. I'm going to talk about sheep too. There's a lot of serendipitous convergence here. How clever it was of sheep to acquire shepherds. Think of what this got them. They could outsource all their problems. Protection from predators, food finding, health maintenance. The only cost in most flocks, not even this, a loss of free mating. What a deal. How clever of sheep, you might say, except, of course, it wasn't the sheep's cleverness. We all know sheep are not exactly rocket scientists. They're not very smart. It wasn't the cleverness of the sheep at all. They were clueless. But it was a very clever move. Whose clever move was it? It was a clever move of natural selection itself. Francis Crick, the co-discoverer of the structure of DNA with Jim Watson, once joked about what he called Orgel's second rule. Leslie Orgel is still a molecular biologist, brilliant guy, and Orgel's second rule is evolution is cleverer than you are. Now, that is not intelligent design, not from Francis Crick. Evolution is cleverer you are. If you understand Orgel's second rule, then you understand why the intelligent design movement is basically a hoax. The designs discovered by the process of natural selection are brilliant, unbelievably brilliant. Again and again, biologists are fascinated with the brilliance of what's discovered. But the process itself is without purpose, without foresight, without design. When I was here 4 years ago, I told a story about an ant climbing a blade of grass. And why was the ant doing it? Was because its brain had been infected with a lancet fluke that was needed to get into the belly of a sheep or a cow in order to reproduce. It was sort of a spooky story, and I think some people may have misunderstood. Lancet flukes aren't smart. I submit that the intelligence of a lancet fluke is down there somewhere between petunia and carrot. They're not really bright. They don't have to be. The lesson we learn from this is you don't have to have a mind to be a beneficiary. The design is there in nature, but it's not in anybody's head. It doesn't have to be. That's the way evolution works. The question, was domestication good for sheep? It was great for their genetic fitness. And here I want to remind you of a wonderful point that Paul McCready made at TED 3 years ago. Here's what he said. 10,000 years ago, at the dawn of agriculture, human population plus livestock and pets was approximately 0.1% of the terrestrial vertebrate landmass. That was just 10,000 years ago. Yesterday, in biological terms. What is it today? Does anybody remember what he told us? 98%. That is what we have done on this planet. Now, I talked to Paul afterwards. I wanted to check out to find out how he'd calculated this and get the sources and so forth. And he gave me a paper that he had written on this, and there was a passage in it which he did not present here, and I think it is so good I'm going to read it to you. Over billions of years on a unique sphere, chance has painted a thin covering of life, complex, improbable, wonderful, and fragile. Suddenly, we humans, a recently arrived species, no longer subject to the checks and balances inherent in nature, have grown in population, technology, and intelligence to a position of terrible power. We now wield the paintbrush. We heard about the atmosphere as a thin layer of varnish. Life itself is just a thin coat of paint on this planet. And we're the ones that hold the paintbrush. And how can we do that? The key to our domination of the planet is culture. And the key to culture is religion. Suppose Martian scientists came to Earth. They would be puzzled by many things. I see I'm going to have to whip along. Anybody know what this is? I'll tell you what it is. This is 1 million people gathering on the banks of the Ganges in 2001, perhaps the largest single gathering of human beings ever, as seen from satellite photograph. Here's a big crowd. Here's another crowd in Mecca. Martians would be amazed by this. They'd want to know how it originated, what it was for, and how it perpetuates itself. Actually, I'm going to pass over this. The ant isn't alone. There's all sorts of wonderful cases of species which, in that case, a parasite gets into a mouse, and it needs to get into the belly of a cat, and it turns the mouse into Mighty Mouse, makes it fearless, so it runs out in the open where it'll be eaten by a cat. True story. In other words, we have these hijackers. You've seen this slide before from 4 years ago. A parasite that infects the brain and induces even suicidal behavior on behalf of a cause other than one's own genetic fitness. Does that ever happen to us? Yes, it does. Quite wonderfully. The Arabic word Islam means submission, means surrender of self-interest to the will of Allah. But I'm not just talking about Islam. I'm talking also about Christianity. This is a parchment music page that I found in a Paris bookstall 50 years ago. And on it says, in Latin, Semen est verbum Dei sator autem, Christus, the Word of God, is the seed, and the sower of the seed is Christ. Same idea. Well, not quite. But in fact, Christians too glory in the fact that they have surrendered to God. I'll give you a few quotes. The heart of worship is surrender. Surrendered people obey God's words even if it doesn't make sense.